Where are my students? Where are my students? Students, where are you?
Hello, Prof.
Yes, can you see me?
Yes, I can see you clearly.
Okay. How did you sign in? Did you sign in with your sign in with your name?
I signed with my name.
Okay.
Now, okay. So I'm not host.
Ataya.
How did you do other people?
I never even answer anybody, because there's no way I can sign 3 devices at the same time. Are they having complaints?
But lecture has started. No. Skill has started and professional has started.
You have confirmed that their lecture is going on.
Yes, lecture is going on. SFM is going on and FR is going on.
My MA guy has not logged in. No. It's only one
Yeah, he has
person.
not logged in.
Let me see if I can alert him and find out what's happening.
Please make me either host or co-host, Abeg.
Okay, I will.
Why is it that I couldn't log in?
I don't know. But is it possible? Wait, what you do is that first of all, use your Gmail to sign in to the Gmail account. Let's see if you can open the Gmail. If the Gmail is open, then try going to Zoom. Go to Zoom and sign in. It will automatically sign you in.
Okay. Maybe I should sign into the foundation Gmail account first.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Adesu, I need people to assist. So can I go and meet? Can I go and join her?
Go and meet her and her sister. Me, I can handle this.
Because this is just only one person. Just admit the person.
Yes.
All right.
Yes, sir. This guy for MI, where are you? Where is my MI list? See if I can call this guy. network, it will cut me. Evening. Am I speaking with Mr. Kehinde Isaac Olusesan? Okay. You registered to for MI class today, right? And this is 22 minutes after 7. After we set. Okay. You know, this class will end by 9 o'clock, whether we finish it or not. It's okay. All right. Okay. All right then. Hello, sir. Please, what's the challenge?
I'm having issue connecting.
Yes, I tried admitting you, and I'm seeing you joining, and it's not connecting.
Yes, I'm joining. The thing is just going. I don't know what happened.
Where are you? Are you in a good where there's good network?
Yes, I didn't.
Can you kindly switch off your phone and on it back and join again?
Okay.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Kende Oluseso. Uh, for the moment, let me unmute you so that I can hear your voice. Good evening, Mr. Kende Oluseso.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. How are you?
Yes, sir. I'm doing fine. Are you, sir?
Fine. One of our class rules is that I will mute you so that you cannot speak. And I will also off your video so that it will not show you. It will only be showing the lecturer's face. So that is what I'll be doing for the moment. And I will also mute
Okay.
you.
Okay.
I believe you can hear me. If you can hear me, can you click on this reaction and click on it that you are hearing me? I believe you are because we just spoke. I believe we can hear myself. I can hear, you can hear me. Now, I will let you in now on what we are going to learn for today. So any moment from now, I'll be sharing my screen. Yes, so I believe you can see my screen. That's good. So what do we stand to gain today? This is a management information class, session 1, and this is held on the stable of First Choice Academy, First Choice Accurate Success League. Now, my name is Chimaroke Waji. I'm a chartered accountant, and I'm your MI lecturer for this diet. Today, we'll be talking about absorption costing versus activity-based costing. Now, look at some of the class rules that we want to observe at all times. 1, students are muted on both audio and video. This is to allow for proper coordination of virtual lectures. So that's why I had to tell you to off your video. Students are allowed to use the chat button to ask questions. In case of technical difficulties from student help and kindly call our helpline, and that's the helpline number. Always advised to listen attentively Sorry, some people were just calling my line after I've told them that I'm going to be in class. They are calling my line, disconnecting my network. Sorry. Let me share my screen again. Okay. This is another part of the class rules. Students are expected to be cordial when they are using the chat button to ask questions. So they should express their concern using the chat button. Students are advised to listen attentively during lectures rather than writing, since the lecture materials would have been provided ahead of the class. So that's why we are sharing our screen. You can see the screen. You can also see the lecturer. So this is like a classroom experience where you are seeing me standing before you. Although if you find some key points that you want to jot, nobody stops you from jotting. And so because we have provided you the material, this is not a case of where you say, sir, please don't clear the board. I'm still copying. No, you can read your notes later. All questions to be attended to after the lectures. And feel free to call me anytime outside the normal lecture. So that's the class rules. Okay. Let me see if My student is still here with me. Participants, okay. You are still here with me. Okay. All right. So I just want to be sure that you are still here. So we are going to go to the lecture for today, which is absorption costing versus activity-based costing. Now, when you say absorption, what do you think absorption means? When you say Gary absorbed the water, that means the Gary has soaked the water and it has taken it into itself. And so costs are being absorbed by products. So that's what they call absorption costing and activity-based costing. You're going to find out the difference. We classify cost into two behaviors, variable cost and fixed cost. Any cost that increase with increasing level of activity is called a variable cost. For example, if you want to make bread, you buy flour, or let's say you buy egg. The number of bread or cake you want to make will determine the number of eggs you are going to use in your production. If you say you're not going to make any cake today, you won't use egg. These are variable costs. If you use 3 pieces of egg in one loaf of bread, if you are making 10 loaves of bread, you say 3 times 10, 30 loaves. Variable cost changes according to level of activity. Now, we have fixed costs, which remains unchanged, irrespective of whether you are making activity or not, whether you are increasing the level of activity or not. Let's say you have a factory where you make this production. Whether you make 200 loaves, 300 loaves is immaterial. The rent remains the same. And so the rent is a fixed cost. So in the process of production, we incur what we call the variable cost and the fixed cost. We incur both costs in the same time. Let's say we want to make bread. As an example, the variable cost will be the flour that you are using to make the bread, which is the material, and the labor you put in to turning the raw material into finished goods. These are your variable costs. Then you must pay the rent and the equipment that you are going to use for the production. You are going to charge depreciation on them. That means these are fixed costs. Now, in order to know how we do our absorption costing and margin and activity-based costing, you have to know that total cost, which is equal to fixed cost, is equal to variable cost plus fixed cost. So total cost, which is equal to full cost, is equal to variable cost plus fixed cost. And there are 2 ways in which we can determine full cost of a product. 2 ways. We said absorption costing and activity-based costing. I will let you in on these 2 ways so that you can see the difference in the method. Now look at the first one, absorption costing. Absorption costing is also called traditional costing method. Now this traditional costing method, like the name implies, has been used for a long time. So what happens here is that materials and labor, which we also call variable costs, but now we call it here direct costs, are traceable to the final product. If you can see diagram 1.1, this is talking about direct allocation of variable cost using absorption costing. You find out that your variable costs, which includes your direct material, example flour and butter, and your direct labor, which is skilled and unskilled labor, are directly allocated to the final product, which is the bread or the cake. That means that because you can trace material to the final product, you can trace your labor to the final product, it is called direct allocation of costs. So all variable costs are direct costs. They can be traced to the final product. So if you can trace them to the final product, then you do what they call direct allocation of costs. The problem lies with indirect costs, which we call overheads. Because overheads cannot be traced to the final product, they are called indirect. How do we now take these indirect costs, allocate them to the final product so that these costs can be absorbed? That is what absorption costing method is going to find out. Which we'll call, okay, let me give you the diagram so you see it. We have to allocate or apportion it first to a halfway house, which is either a department or a manager, using an appropriate measure or basis of apportionment. So first of all, your indirect costs have to go through a manager or a department for it to be housed using an appropriate basis of apportionment. Then if that one is done, the manager or the department will now absorb those costs into the final product. So you can see in diagram 1.2, indirect absorption of fixed costs. We see the rent and the depreciation of factory equipment. They are first channeled to a manager or a department, and from there, the department takes it to the final product because that department is responsible for making that product. All right, let's go further. Look at some of the appropriate measures or appropriate basis of apportionment that are given below. For example, you want to apportion your factory rent. We normally use floor space to apportion it, floor space. If you want to use any other basis, you are free. But the most appropriate for rent is floor space. What about factory lighting? Maybe NEPA bring light bill and you want to apportion it equitably. Many people normally count number of points. Yes, so that's that way, number of points, or you can say number of lighting facility. Then we have the heating. You count the number of watts. So you check how many watts is this department using, how many watts is that other department using, that is what you use. What about depreciation? Depreciation, the most appropriate measure is to get the cost value of each equipment in that department. Then insurance, you use the equipment at cost. So the basis of apportionment you use is a matter of common sense and judgment. There are no strict rules, no formula involved, just your common sense. So we are not going to penalize you if you exercise your common sense. So your basis of apportionment may be different from my basis of apportionment because we may be thinking differently. In a manufacturing process, we know that there are both production departments and service departments. So what do we do when there are production department and service department? You know, the service department do not produce any goods. And you want to allocate all the costs in all departments to a product. So what do? This is what we do. First of all, we apportion the overheads to all the departments, both the production department and the service department, using the appropriate basis of apportionment that we've discussed above. Now, that would mean that if you want to apportion lighting, you will count the number of lighting equipment in production A department, production B department, production C department, service A department, service B department, and you apportion them. So that's the first thing you're going to do. Apportion all the costs to all the departments as the appropriate basis of apportionment we allow. Second one is to reapportion the service department into the production department in the ratio of the cost incurred by the production department. In this way, all the costs that is being allocated to the service department will be nilled off and transferred to the production department, because it is the production department that should bear the cost. We are about to push this cost to the final product. So there's a need for us to apportion all the service department costs that do not produce anything into the production department so that they can do the work. Then the last step is to absorb the overhead from the production department to the final product using what is called overhead absorption rate. Now, I want to let you know that this overhead absorption rate is the most important thing you should know in absorption costing. The concept of overhead absorption rates can never be missed when doing absorption costing. So this is the main thing that makes it different from activity-based costing. So I want you to pay attention to that. Now look at the overhead absorption rate. Is a rate. When we say what is a rate, rate is like a price. Rate is like a unit cost. So this is the cost or unit cost of what you are portioning to all the departments. So the overhead absorption rate to all the departments. Let me see if students. Okay, I believe you can hear me. So overhead absorption rate is a rate at which costs is being apportioned to the departments. One important thing about overhead absorption rate is that the departments depend on what we call labor hours. So overhead absorption rate is the rate at which overheads are charged to all the departments in terms of labor, because the budgeted level of activity will be labor costs. So you can see the formula there. Overhead absorption rate equals to total estimated overhead cost. So you get all the overhead costs together. That's the numerator. The denominator will now be the budgeted level of activity. So budgeted means it is from past experience, maybe the past month or the past year's costs. You are using it as a budget benchmark for your production. So you use that as your budgeted level of activity. If you say last month you did 2,000 hours, you're expecting that you are going to do the same 2,000 hours this month. So you're using that as your budgeted level of activity. Like I said, budgeted level of activity when doing absorption costing is labor hours. So you can see that the expected cost for each item is the overhead absorption rate, which is this OAR we calculated, times the level of activity, which is the labor hours. That is the expected cost for each department. All right, so when you get an expected cost, it's like budgeting to go to the market to buy something. It's like budgeting to go to the market to buy food stuff. You budget that you are going to buy so and so and so for a certain amount of money. That's your expected amount. And that is what you took in your bag or your purse, and off you went to the market. When you got to the market and you now saw that things that you thought that was so and so price is not so. Sometimes the price might be higher than what you thought, or it might be lower than what you thought. So this gives rise to what we call over or under absorption. Over and under absorption is a situation that occurs when you compare your estimated cost, what you budgeted to go to the market with your actual cost, the cost that you actually saw these things in the market. So let's look at this over and under absorption. What is over absorption? Over absorption is a situation whereby the expected cost from a department is greater than the actual cost incurred by the department. This means that more overheads have been built into the preparing the budget. So let's say you want to buy a bag of rice and you estimated that the bag of rice 50 kg is going to be 30,000 naira. And you took 30,000 naira and you went. Only for you to find out that it is 25,000 naira. That means you have over budgeted. You have over absorbed. What you took to the market is greater than what the actual reality is on the ground. So you can see that over absorption is expected cost minus actual costs. And it's going to give you a positive figure. If it gives you a positive figure, that means there is an over absorption. It is also called over recovery of overhead. So either you call it over absorption or over recovery. Now look at this example. For example, I suppose I plan to give 1,000 naira for dinner to each student that joined the class today. And perhaps I budgeted 30 students in class today. Wow, I was budgeting actually, let's say 3 students, but now I found one. So but let's look at this example. I budgeted that I will find 30 students in class today. It means that in my budget, what will I have done? I will say 1,000 naira multiplied by 30 students, that is 30,000 naira. That 30,000 naira is the expected cost. Now, that is what I'm putting at the back of my mind. I will not spend more than 30,000. So I took it to class. Now, when I came to class, I discovered that there are only 10 students. Wow. That means if I spend 1,000 naira each on them, I would have spent 10,000 naira on the students. So my expected cost, 30,000 naira, minus my actual cost, 10,000 naira. The difference is a positive value. 20,000 naira is the over absorption. That means I budgeted 20,000 naira more than actual. This is over absorption. Now let's look at the opposite of over absorption, which is under absorption. Under absorption is the opposite of over absorption. Here you are spending more than what you budgeted for. It means that you budgeted less than what you plan to spend. So let's go to the example I gave to you. Okay, before we go there, under absorption leads to negative figure. That means it is insufficient when compared to the actual reality. And so it is called under recovery. So suppose I plan to give 1,000 naira to each student in the class, and I budget for 30 students in the class. And I took 30,000 naira with me to class. That is my expected cost as always. Now I came to the class. Lo and behold, 50 students in the class. Ha! I will shout. Oh. That means what I expected was surpassed. That means I'm going to give them 50,000. So what will I do? Expected cost, 30,000. Actual cost, 50,000 over, sorry, that is under absorption. So you help me and change this thing to under absorption, sorry, under absorption. So if you've printed, just use a biro to mark it, it's under absorption. So you can take note of that. So under absorption is always a negative figure. That would mean that I will have to go and find 20,000 naira one way or the other to give to the students, because I have promised that I am going to give them 30,000 is what I planned, and 50,000 is what is cropping up. So I can't help it than borrow. So let's look at one example here. Example 1.1 says BRT company is preparing its production overhead and determining the apportionment of these overheads to products. Cost centers, expenses, and related information have been budgeted. So look at the budgeted information. You can see the total figure here. This second column here is the total figures for all these things. Now look at the departments. We have the machine A, machine B, assembly. So these three are production departments. Now, canteen and maintenance are service departments. Of course, you don't produce anything in canteen, and the maintenance are the people who maintain the machines. So look at the indirect wages. What you find out is that the sum of these figures here, so if I decide to add machine A, machine B, assembly, and canteen with maintenance, if I add them up together, I should get 78,560. The same thing here, if I add these figures here, I get this. So, but you'll be wondering, why do we not have anything here? in maintenance under consumable materials. This is because maintenance do not use consumable materials. Canteen could use a consumable material, so fine. But what is of most importance now is, if you look at rent and rates, you only find total. You cannot find anything here in any of these other columns. You cannot find anything here. That means these costs has not yet been allocated. So we need to find an appropriate basis of apportionment to allocate this 16,700 so that it can go in all these empty spaces. The same thing with building insurance, the same thing with power, the same thing with lighting. So the overheads ends at lighting. The overheads stops at lighting. If you look at depreciation, machinery, okay, sorry, it stops as depreciation. Depreciation, machinery, see the empty spaces here. Now look at value of machinery. The value of a machine is not an expensive. So if you buy a machine, 402,000 naira, and you bought machine A 201, machine B 179, and for assembly you bought 22,000. You cannot allocate them as expenses. These are current assets. These are capital assets. They are not recurrent assets. You'll be using these things for a long time. So this value of machine is not an expense, but rather is one of the basis of apportionment, which we'll use to apportion the depreciation. Now look at the power usage. This is in percentage, 100% here, here, here. That means in canteen, there is no power usage in the canteen. Look at direct labor. You can see that direct labor is found in only machine A, machine B, and assembly. So you can see that direct labor can be found there. Machine usage, you can see that you can only find it in machine A and machine B, and no other place. And look at area square. Look at the basis floor space. Now you were told, using the direct apportionment to production department method and basis of apportionment which you consider most appropriate from the information provided, calculate overhead totals for the 3 departments. So you see, you are asked to use the direct apportionment to production department. Direct apportionment. And they say use the basis of apportionment which you consider. Students will not allow me calling my line. We are told to use the basis of apportionment which you consider most appropriate to calculate the overheads for the 3 departments. So how do you do that? Okay, for the moment now, let me unmute you to ask you if you can see or still hear me. Okay. Hold on a moment.
Okay.
Mr. Kende, can you see my screen?
Yes, sir. Yes, very well.
You can see the solution I presented there, right?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. Can you see the question that I'm producing here that is showing required? Can you see it?
Yes, I can see it.
So as I move from question to solution, you can see, right?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, very good. So let me mute you back. I just wanted to be sure that you can see.
Okay, thank you.
All right. All right, so look at the solution here presented before us. So this is the list of solution that we can use to get the answer. Now, if you look at the question here that says the direct apportionment method, look at this indirect costs. Everything has been done for you here. So you don't do anything different. You just use the indirect cost that has been given to you. You don't alter it. So look at the solution here. The indirect cost has been given to you. Let me bring this thing down. Sorry. Let me bring this thing down a bit so that it will not be touching. All right. So look at the indirect cost. It has been given to you here. You do nothing. You just take it like that. Now let's go to the consumables. The consumables has been given to you. You don't change it. So maintenance does not have consumable. So the same thing here, for maintenance, you put 0. So let's go to rent and rates. The rent and rates, this total figure, you have to spread it along all the departments. So the appropriate basis of apportionment is the square meter. So from the question here, how do we find the appropriate figures to put in rent and rates? What you will do is this. This 10,000 naira, this 10,000 square meter is for machine A. That is the floor space. Divide this 10,000 by 45,000. If you divide, okay, let me get my calculator. My calculator still be coming up. Calculator. Okay, let me make this thing smaller. In a moment, you will see the calculator I'll be using now. So now the focus is on my calculator. All right. So if you look at how do we get the rent and rate, you will say 10,000 floor space for machine A divided by the total floor space, which is 45,000, multiplied by the expenses given to you in rent and rates, which is 16,700. That gives you a total of 3,711. So 3,711 is our rent and rents. So if you look at it here, 3,711. That is how we got this figure here. So the same way we are going to do here, let me demonstrate for machine B so that you will see the principle for machine B. For machine B, all right, for machine B, you go back to machine B, go back to your floor space. You know it's 12,000 floor space divided by 45,000 multiplied by the overhead cost of 16,700. That gives you 4,453. So 4,453 becomes your value, the value to be used. I don't know if you can see. Okay. So if you can see my screen, so that's your answer there, 4,453. So the same way you do for all of them. So going to insurance and buildings, once again, our cost is this 2,400. We can confirm 2,400 is the insurance building. Now the appropriate measure is floor area, floor space. So the same way we use in doing rent and rates, that is the way we do insurance and building, and we get this figure. Going to power, we say it is the percentage usage. So all we need to do is this percentage power usage, 55% of 8,600 will give you the figure that will be put here. Then 40% of 8,600 will give you the figure you will put here, which is obviously 4,730. That is how you do for all of them. This one doesn't have any. This one is 0. Heating and light, the same basis. Depreciation, value of machinery. So all you need to do is to say 201 divided by 402 multiplied by this 40,200 will give you the figure here in machine A. Machine B will be 179,000 divided by 402,000 multiplied by 40,200 will give you the figure here. The same thing applies to assembly. For counting, there is none. For maintenance, there is none. Like you can see in the answer here, presented by 0. So all the overheads has been fully apportioned. So what you're just doing now, you have apportioned the overheads. So when you find the total costs, you're going to get 166,760. That is the same thing if you have calculated it from here down to machinery. It's the same thing here that you got here. So you do the same for others, and this is their figures. Simple to get. It's the simple arithmetic. Sum them up to get this. Now, you have to reallocate some of the costs. You find out that there are 2 service departments, the canteen and the maintenance. So you ask yourself, we want to reallocate canteen costs to all other costs. After all, maintenance people, they go to the canteen, but the canteen does not require maintenance. The maintenance go to canteen. So you have to reallocate this 32,797. You have to make it 0 because you don't want anything to be on the service department. So you can see here, I have put it in brackets. So this is the cost I want to reallocate. So how do I share it? So what I would do is this. So let me bring my calculator. What I will do is, where is the calculator again? All right. So this is what I will do. I will ask myself this question. I want to reallocate this. So apart from this canteen, apart from canteen, let me total machine A cost, which is 45 930. That of machine B is 45,683. That of assembly is 25,801. I will jump that of canteen because that is what I want to allocate. Then what of maintenance? Maintenance is 16,549 equal to, so I have 133,963. 133,963. So what do I do for machine A? I will say machine A is already 45,930. 45,930 divided by 133,690, which is the total, multiplied by the cost of canteen I want to allocate, 32,797, and it gives me 11,268. So that is what I will be getting as my new figure. That is the new figure here. 11,000 something here. So I have successfully allocated a fraction of this into the machine. I will do the same thing with machine B. I will do for canteen. This one I'll bring the same figure here because I want to make it 0. I will also share here. So subtotal, this one remains the same, nothing spoiled. This one is now added to this to get a new figure. This one gets a new figure. This one gets a new figure. Now this is 0. This gets a new figure. Now the total cost does not change, but it changes hands. So now let's look at reallocation again of the maintenance. We use the same method to reallocate maintenance. So you find out that you put nothing here in the total. You reallocate this maintenance cost of 2,600. What goes here using the same method will be this 8,058 naira. Machine B, you will get 8,015 naira, 4,527 in assembly. Of course, the canteen is already 0 before, so you don't put anything there. Then this figure you want to allocate, bring it down. So at the end, there's a 0 here in canteen, in maintenance. There's a 0 here in canteen, and everything has been absorbed to the production department. So it's only the production department that has the costs. The totals are still the same, but they have been reallocated to the total production cost. So that's how we do the first part. Now look at the second part of the question. Says, determine the budgeted overhead absorption rates for each of the production departments using appropriate basis of absorption. Overhead absorption rates. So the overhead absorption rate, the formula is the total estimated overhead costs divided by the total budgeted level of activity. As we can see here, the total the total overhead cost is 166,760 as can be seen here. Then the total budgeted labor is 35,000 hours. How did we get that? How did we get that? Did we get it from the question? If you look at the question here, is this 35,000 hours? That is the total direct labor hours that we are using. So absorption costing, direct labor hours will not be missed. So as you see here, 166,760 divided by 36,000 hours, you get 4 naira 76 kobo per direct labor hours. So this is the rate at which you will charge your overheads into the departments. So this is the overhead absorption rate. This process we just did now is very, very key if you want to do absorption costing. You must always find your overhead absorption rates. Let's go to the C part. The C part says the total production overhead expenditure of the company was 176,533. That is the total, that is the actual. And the actual activity was as follows. So look at the actual direct labor hours here. Look at the actual direct machine usage hours. You are now asked to find under or over absorption of overheads. So is it an over absorption or is it an under absorption? Let's find out. Okay. Look at your overhead absorption rate, which is just given to you here, 4,760, 4.76. You put that in all the departments. Now look at your direct labor hours, 8,200, 6,521. Where did we get that from? We got it from here. This is the actuals. Now we're not going to use this. We're not going to use this. So we are saying that if this is what was budgeted, this is the actuals now. It was budgeted that they use here to determine all these figures. But in this question here, you are asked to use these actuals. So this actual labor hours, you multiply them with this overhead absorption rate that you've gotten from it. This is a predetermined rate. So you multiply them, you get this figure, multiply this by this figure, and when you total all these figures, you got this. Now, this is your expected overhead. Now, your actual overhead was given to you here, 176,533. You less it. So when you get a negative figure, we said is under absorption of overheads because you have not provided much more than what you went to see in the market. So you were 2,317 naira short of what the actual realities on the ground was. Now let's go to the next method, which is the activity-based costing. The activity-based costing is slightly different from that of the absorption costing method. Now, I will highlight two things that makes them different. Calling my line. Absorption costing uses what they call overhead absorption rate. Overhead absorption rate. While activity-based costing uses what we call cost driver rate. So the cost driver rate, I'll call it CDR, is the same formula we use for overhead absorption rate that we are using for cost driver rate. So we are saying total cost for cost pool, now not for all the overhead, but for each cost pool. divided by the total budgeted level of activity for each cost driver. If you see the allocation of variable costs in activity-based costing, is the same thing as that of absorption costing, because variable costs are not the problem. The problem there is the fixed costs. Now, both of them uses the same halfway house. We take it from the fixed cost, from the fixed cost itself, what generates the fixed cost, to this halfway house. Here you can see invoicing and setup, and you can see these are absorbed to the final product. So look at this important point here. Absorption costing are incurred by nouns. A noun is a name of a person, place, animal, or thing. So you can see here, a manager is a noun, a department is a noun. ABC costing are driven by verbs. A verb is a doing word, an action word. So you can see that all this setup, invoicing are all activities. Then secondly, absorption costing has just one OAR, which is based on labor hours. Whereas ABC, you will see several CDRs, cost driver rates. So if there are 5 cost drivers, you have 5 cost driver rates. If there are 2 cost drivers, you have 2 cost driver rates. So let's look at one more example and let's see how we can handle it. Danfoss Company, sorry, let me take some water. Danfoss Company makes and sells 2 products called X and Y. Now look at the data for production and sales for each month. For product X and product Y, we have the sales demand, 4,000, 8,000. Look at the direct material cost, 20 naira, 10 naira. Direct labor costs, direct labor hours. This is hours per unit, so it's 0.1 hours. What is 0.1 hours? If 60 minutes make 1 hour, so 0.1 hour will be a fraction of a minute. So 0.1 multiplied by 60 will give you 6 minutes. Why this other one, 0.2, will give you like 12 minutes. Now look at direct labor cost per unit. So this is the direct labor cost in terms of monetary value. The other one was in terms of hours. Then we are told that production overheads are 500,000 naira each month. We are now giving an analysis of the overheads. Now look at these overheads here. This is batch setup, order handling. These are the activities. These are the cost drivers. Now look at the total overhead costs. Now the difference between absorption costing and activity-based costing is how they treat this 500,000 overhead. Absorption costing, we just say 500,000 divided by total labor hours. They will get overhead absorption rate. But ABC, we say no, let's take them one by one. 100,000 divided by the number of setup, total number of setup, you will get a figure. You use it. 200,000 divided by total number of hours, total number of orders. You get that figure, you apply it in product X and Y. The same thing you do for machining, the same thing you do for quality control. So that is what we are going to be doing now. Look at the calculate the full production cost. When we say full production cost, we mean that we should calculate both the variable cost and the fixed cost. That is full cost. So how do we solve this question? So let's get a solution. Sorry. So this is the question here. So let's go to the solution. Now, look at your sales demand. It was given to you in the question, 4,000, 8,000. You bring them up here. The direct material cost per unit was given to you in the question, 20 and 10. That is what I'm putting down here. Total material cost will be the multiplication of 4,000 and 220 naira. Give you this. The same thing will give you here. 80,000, 80,000. You add them up together, you get 160,000. Now your direct labor costs. Now take note, it is direct labor cost. Will not allow me to record this. Direct labor costs. You are given the question here to be 2 naira and 4 naira. So you apply them, you are 2 naira, 4 naira. So what is your total labor cost? It's going to be your 2 naira multiplied by 4,000. That gives you 8,000. Same thing, 4 naira multiplied by 8,000 gives you 32,000. When you add the two of them together, you have 40,000. So that's given your prime costs is going to give you 80,000 plus 8,000, which gives you 88,000. Here is going to be 80,000 plus 32,000 gives you 112,000. And when you add these two together, you have 200,000. Or you do it this way, 160 plus 40, same 200,000. Now your overheads. How did we get overhead of 100,000 here and 400,000? We note that this 500,000 is the total overheads. That is what we got here, 500,000. But how did it spread to be 100 here and 400 here? First thing to do is to calculate our overhead absorption rate. Our overhead absorption rate is the 500,000, which is the total cost, divided by the labor hours. So what is your labor hours? We'll come back here. We say 0.1 hours, 0.1 hours for 1 unit multiplied by 4,000 units. That is what I mean by 0.1 times 4,000. Then 0.2 times 8,000. 0.2 times 8,000. So when you multiply these two together, so let me do it now here. Let me share my calculator. So you say, I can do it like this, open a bracket, 0.1 multiplied by 4,000. I close the bracket, it gives me 400, plus, I open the other bracket, 0.2 multiplied by 8,000. As I close the bracket, I see that that one gives me 16. So I have 400 plus 16. If I now add them together by pressing equal to sign, gives me 2,000. So 2,000 is my total hours. Total direct labor hours is 2,000. So what do? I will now say my overhead absorption rate is going to give me 500,000 divided by 2,000. That gives me 250 naira. So 250 naira is our overhead absorption rate. So that's this 250 you got here, overhead absorption rate. So you will now use that 250 to multiply that of each department. So 250 for product X multiplied by how many hours was used in product X? We said it before, it is 0.1 times 0 times 4,000 is still the same thing here. So when you multiply these two, it will give you 400. 400 times 250,000 going to give you 100,000. So that's the 100,000 we got here. Product Y, 250 multiplied by these same figures we put here. This one will give you 16 multiplied by 250,000, 250 naira will give you 400,000, which is what we got here. So what is our full production cost? Our full production cost is 88,000 plus 100,000, which gives you 188. And here, this is one. Gives you 700. And so that is our full cost of the product. So that is the full cost of the product. Now we'll go to part B. Part B says we should use activity-based costing. So how do we use activity-based costing? So look at activity-based costing. Yes, our sales demand 4,000 rather, and 8,000 like we did in part A. Now your prime cost, so there's no need doing all these things here again. There's no need doing this thing here, what you did here to get this 88. So is this prime cost here that I am just taking because it's the same thing. So I'll just take the prime cost and just put it here, down here, and that solves it. Then the overhead is still 500,000, but how did it translate to this figure here, 263 and 237? How did it translate? That is what we will know in our activity-based costing. Now, we are told that there are different cost drivers. So in the question, you were given cost drivers. You are given batch setup, which is 100,000. This is this 100,000 here. That's this total. Batch setup, total is 100,000. What is the cost driver? The cost driver is number of setups, which is what we did here, number of setups. Now, how did we calculate CDR to be 5,000 naira? So this is how we did it. Your CDR, okay, look at the calculation here. Your CDR is total batch setup costs, 100,000, divided by number of setups, which is 20. How did we get the 20? It is this total number of setup here, 20, that we are referring to. So this is 10 plus 10 gives you 20. So you are saying this 100,000 divided by 20. That is what we did here. 100,000 divided by 20 got 5,000. So that's the 5,000 we put here. So how did we get our 50,000, 50,000. All you need to do here is 5,000 multiplied by 10. So you say 5,000, which you've gotten, multiplied by this 10. That gives you 50,000. 5,000 again, multiplied by this other 10, gives you the other 50,000. So you see the 100,000 has been allocated 50-50. What about the order handling? Order handling 200,000. Total figure for number of hours, number of orders is 40. So you are going to do 200 divided by 40, which is what we did here. 200,000 divided by 40, and we got 5,000. So this 5,000 is what we put down here, 5,000. So we say 5,000 multiplied by what? Multiplied by 24. Multiplied by this 24 here. That is what gives you 120. Then this same 5,000 multiplied by 16. That is what gives you 80,000. So when you add 120 plus 80, it gives you 200. That's the same method you use to calculate your machining and your quality control. So as many as there in the batch setup, the order handling, machining and control, quality control, as many cost pool that you have, and as many cost pool years that you have to calculate their cost driver rate, which is gotten from this cost driver. So it's unlike absorption costing where you just use only direct labor hours. This one you have to consider the activity. What drives the activity? What is the cost driver? You have to calculate the cost driver separately. So when you total this, you get this 263, that is this figure here. Then when you total everything down in product Y, you get 237,000, which is this. So that is how we got these figures. So when you add this to this to this, you find out that your full production cost has now changed. So can you now see the difference between the overhead costing? Okay, let me bring the difference side by side here so you can see them. Okay, let me open it. Now look at absorption costing. In absorption costing, you find out that the total cost here is 188 for product X. But here, it is 351 for product X in activity-based costing. For product Y, it is 512. Activity-based costing, it is 349. The total cost does not change. So you see, whichever method you use, the total cost does not change. What changes is what each department are bearing. So this is mainly used when you are using it to appraise departments. So because whichever method you use, the total cost for the incurred by the organization does not change. So I believe we've learned a lot. So let's go to the summary. Look at the summary. Summary of lecture. Absorption costing is a traditional approach that deals with overheads involving 3 stages. We call it the 3 A's: allocation, apportionment, and absorption. So what do? The allocation is done directly to the department or to the product that is affected, or the department that is affected. So if I tell you that I have 2 departments, one of them is producing iced fish and the other one is producing smoked fish, and I have an expense of firewood, of course, you know the smoked fish is going to take it. If I say, okay, I want to have an expense of compressor for refrigerator, you cannot be putting compressor charge to the smoked fish department because they don't have anything to do with fridge. Is the iced fish. So this is done directly to the department affected. Now, apportionment is done using suitable basis. So apportionment is when you don't know who and who you will give. Maybe they bring something to share in your family. And you say, okay, how am I going to share it to these people? You start cracking your brain. Should I share it according to their ages? Should I share it according to their rank? So anything, some people will say, okay, share it according to their ages. That is an appropriate measure of a suitable basis of apportionment. Some people will say, okay, let me share it according to the position you took in class. That is an appropriate basis of apportionment. Then after that is done, we have what we call the absorption. Absorption is the final thing that is done, where you take this cost that you have apportioned or you have allocated, you are taking it to the final product because the product should bear the cost because you want to sell it. We saw over absorption and under absorption. We say that this occurs when the expected cost is not equal to the actual cost. And so we saw over absorption. That means you took more money to the market than what you got there. Like as I told you in that example, I budgeted 30,000 to share to students, and only 10,000 naira was eventually shared. So that means I took 20,000 naira more. Then under absorption is the opposite, whereby you budgeted less than what you saw in actual reality. So I budgeted 30,000, and what I saw is I have to spend 50,000. So that means 20,000 was under recovered. We now saw that absorption costing uses direct labor hours only to find your overhead absorption, while activity-based costing uses cost driver rate. That is the major difference between the two. One of them is labor rate is the driving force. That is what you use to absorb overheads. While activity-based costing, you will get your cost driver rates. Now, ABC is a modern approach, while absorption costing is also called traditional approach. It's an ancient approach. So you'll be seeing in a question using the traditional method and the more modern method. So they might ask something like that. So don't be saying, they didn't say ABC. When they say using the more modern method of full costing, that's ABC. When they say traditional method that is based on direct labor hours, that's absorption. Both of them have their advantages and their disadvantages. So at this point now, we'll want to take some of your questions. I know you may have some questions to share or to ask, so let me see those questions. So I will stop sharing my slides now and I'll turn to your questions. Like we said before, you can put your question in the chats, so that I can see them and attend to them. If there is no question, I will assume that you understand everything. I would like to unmute you so that I would like to hear from you, though, because we are only one here, me and you here. So let's see how interactive it's going to be. So, Mr. Kende, I've unmuted you. Did you enjoy the class?
Yeah, very well. It was very clear, and I love the speed. As in, actually came to my level, and everything you taught today was well understood.
Thank you so
So
much.
I don't know, maybe in the course of reviewing today's class, if I come across any gray area, then I can call your attention to it. But as far as I'm concerned, what you taught tonight is well understood, sir.
Thank you so much. So I will want you now to take the I can pass questions. Try to see if you can get questions on bordering on all the what I've just given to you now. I will want to show you something. Let me unmute you first. Let me mute you first. I will show you something that you can use to track your record. Let me see if I can get that. There's something I use to help students track their record so that if they are doing past questions, okay, I will open my okay. Now let me share my screen so that you will see it here. Let me share my screen so that you see it here. Now, if you look at my screen, you see past questions treated register. So you get something like this. You write the name of your lecturer, the diet, and the course code. Let's say this is MI, your level. Now, this is for essay questions. So look at 2014. It ends up to 2019. So you can do something like this. You can use it for all levels, for foundation levels, skills, and professional levels. You can use this for every of them. So look at question 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So as you are looking at it, you are ticking them off. As you are solving them, you are ticking them off. Solving, you are ticking them off. Then this is for foundation only. This side is for foundation only. So question 1 to 20. Question 1 to 20, as you are solving them, you are ticking them off. So this is something that you can use. So please use a different sheet for a different course. All right. So this is one. I'm going to show you another which is important for you to use. I call it question trend. Call it question trend. Okay, I don't have the question trend here for MI. So, but the point is, if you go to your past questions, once you see any item that has to do with what we just treated now, look at the diet. Check whether it is a multiple choice question or an essay question. And as you are solving it, be ticking it off. So when you are revising, you are looking at it. So you are ticking them off. In your book, you are writing the date in which you solved them. So that's where we come to the end of our class today. If you have any question, feel free to call my number. You can see it in your material. My number is there. And I've also called you today. You know, my number is there. So feel free to call me. So thank you so much. See you again in the next class. The next class which you will have with me is your next MI class is tomorrow by 9 to 11. So I wish you the best. Thank you so much for the nice interaction you had with me today. Good night.